Count Dooku has long been an underrated character in Star Wars. The films really only scratch the surface. In my opinion, they're actually, the least interesting Dooku ever is, and that's taking nothing away from it. I love Christopher Lee, but I don't know, there's so much more to the character. At this point in the story, he's the official figurehead for the Separatist Alliance. He's a galaxy-wide known politician, and he also happens to be a Sith Lord on the side. But I feel like for a long time, Dooku's backstory was overlooked in canon. The fact he is a former Jedi Master and trained Qui-Gon were of course established in Attack of the Clones. And I don't know if there was a lot of legend stuff about it. I don't really know much about Legends, to be honest, but it felt to me, at least based on the Star Wars content I was paying attention to, like it rarely came up. His backstory was never super relevant in the Clone Wars. But of course, the release of Tales of the Jedi last year changed all of this. It put the spotlight firmly on Dooku in his earlier years for 3 fantastic shorts. This for me is what sparked my whole renewed interest in the character, and huge shout out to Corey Burton's performance in those episodes. Fantastic. All the way through the Clone Wars as well, he's great. I even read once that Christopher Lee was super impressed with Corey Burton's performance when he heard it for the Clone Wars, so I think that says all you need to know, really. I love Tales of the Jedi. I love the Dooku episodes. Some of my favourite Star Wars content in recent years. I know everyone likes it, but I love it personally. So to learn more about the character, I recently listened to Cavan Scott's 2019 audio drama called Dooku Jedi Lost. The book/audio drama, I don't really know what to call it. You can buy it as a book script if you want. It's formally an audio drama though, so I guess that's what you'd call it. It spans many decades of his life. And Claudia Gray's novel Master and Apprentice has some key flashback scenes with a young Qui-Gon and Dooku also. Love that book. So in experiencing these newer Dooku stories and learning more and seeing more of the character, I think they paint a very interesting picture about what makes the character tick. And they help give some great insight into the how and why of what turned Jedi Master Dooku into Darth Tyrannus, which is exactly what I want to talk about today. How did this happen? How did Dooku fall to the dark side? Be warned, I'll be touching on some scenes from the books that I just mentioned, but mainly I will be completely spoiling Tales of the Jedi here. They're 3 10-minute, 15-minute-ish episodes. Check them out. They're fantastic. First of all, let's try and establish a timeline. There's lots of consternation about when exactly Dooku left the Jedi Order in canon because of questions raised by the Sith Lord episode of Tales of the Jedi, in which Dooku appears to be walking around the Jedi Temple, accepted by all of his peers, just hanging out, implying at first glance to the viewer that he must still be a Jedi at this point. That's understandable, and of course he still has his lightsaber. However, the novel Master and Apprentice and Dooku Jedi Lost both established that Dooku left the Jedi years before The Phantom Menace, potentially as much as a decade before. A lot of people took this as a continuity issue, and the expanded world of Star Wars media imploding on itself or something like that, which has been very rare since the Disney established canon in 2014. However, in watching The Sith Lord, it is never explicitly stated that Dooku is still a Jedi at this point. He chose to leave the Jedi Order and basically assume his rightful place as heir to Serenno. I won't fully spoil it here, but some stuff goes down on the planet in Dooku Jedi Lost, and the vacancy of Count of Serenno opens up, and Dooku chooses to assume that position. And Dooku's goals are pretty clear that he wants to rebuild Serenno into an independent system, a strong independent system outside of the Republic. As a bit of a side note, that basically makes Serenno the first separatist planet, which makes, of course, tons of sense since it is Dooku's homeworld. But everything was okay with the Jedi, he did that, Dooku made that decision. At the time, Yoda let him keep his lightsaber. It was always welcome back to visit the temple. So it's fair to say the events depicted in The Sith Lord is just one of these visits, and on a rewatch, I viewed it that way, and it was totally fine. It actually added a little bit of extra context to it, which I enjoyed. So Dooku chose to leave the Jedi, become Count of Serenno, but everything was all good with the Jedi, at least as far as they knew. His former co-workers were like, oh yeah, Dooku's pieced the scene, but he's still our mate. But there's no doubt at all. Dooku had become increasingly disenfranchised with the Jedi. Basically, their entire role in the Republic and its structure prior to this point, he had some beef with them. There's a scene I really liked in Dooku Jedi Lost where Dooku and Qui-Gon are at this formal function event on Coruscant, representing the Jedi. He sees it as a waste of time and basically vents about it. He had a real issue with the Jedi basically acting as figureheads, attending these functions, doing stuff that didn't really matter, compared to getting out there in the galaxy and making a difference in people's lives. And we see that loud and clear in Dooku's first Tales of the Jedi short called Justice. In it, we see him confronted by the corruption and greed that has been allowed to exist in the Republic. In the episode, he and a young Qui-Gon Jinn visit a Republic world where the Senator has completely neglected his people to starve and fend for themselves, while he and his family thrives in the capital. This is the first on-screen example of Dooku being confronted by a harsh reality that corruption like this could be allowed to exist under the watch of the Galactic Senate and is continuously being overlooked. He's outraged by it. He was originally sent there by the Senate to rescue the Senator's son. He gets there, learns in fact that the townspeople are holding the son ransom, so the Senator will actually just give them some bloody food and take care of them. Dooku's outraged by the condition of the town that he's in, so he sides with the townspeople in place of the Senator. There's a line I love where the greedy Senator tells Dooku to stand down because he serves the Senate, and Dooku makes the correction and says he serves the people of the Republic. That really is Dooku in a nutshell right there. He doesn't just follow orders or blindly trust in government. Dooku knows exactly why he does what he does as a Jedi. He has a strong conscience, and that particular aspect of his character is quite admirable, actually. This thread continues in the following episode called Choices, where we see the dynamic between Dooku and Mace Windu play out, and it's great to see because it perfectly exemplifies what makes the characters so different. You get it right from the first scene. The pair are sent to Raxus by the Jedi Council to recover the body of a Jedi Master Khatri. Master Khatri has died mysteriously on the planet, and Dooku is motivated to uncover the truth, while Mace Windu is straight up just like, why do you bother? We can only do what the High Council and the Senate tells us. We were sent to recover Khatri, so just follow the rules. No wonder they clash. Dooku is hyper aware of the Republic's flaws at this point, and Mace is totally oblivious to them. So fast forward in the episode, Dooku was right. Master Khatri was killed as part of a rebel conspiracy on the planet against another dodgy senator, believe it or not. No wonder he started his own separatist government, dude. These senators are just the worst. The rebel they capture tells them that Jedi are lapdogs for the Senate. All over the galaxy they claim peace, but keep law and order for the rich and powerful. When Dooku hears this, he is visibly affected by it in the animation. He sees the truth in it because he has seen it before, literally 10 minutes ago in the Justice episode, if you're binge watching all of these. But no doubt there's been plenty of other examples throughout his life, and I love the little subtle animation performance that they give him there. It clearly resonates with him when this is said. Ultimately though, Dooku uncovering this plot led to a little skirmish. The senator of the planet died, the bad one, and once everything was said and done, Dooku uncovered the truth. Great for him. Sounds great, but the Jedi Council disapproved of Dooku's initiative, leading to the death of a senator, of a galactic senator. Obviously an important person, even if they were, questionable. Master Khatri was a Jedi Council member, and they choose to replace her on the council with Mace Windu instead of Dooku. In the episode, Mace gets the seat on the council, basically for following protocol, doing as he was told, being a good boy. Dooku finds this, of course, incredibly insulting. He took action in the moment, and they uncovered the truth as a result, but the council didn't like that. There's a great scene at the end of the episode I loved. Corey Burton delivers the line to Mace Windu. I'm not even going to try and do a Dooku impression, but he says, "How kind of you, Master Jedi." And it's brilliant. Go and check out the episode. Rewatch it if you haven't seen it in a little while. The delivery of that line from Burton right at the end of the episode to Mace Windu, it's filled with such disgust, and it sounds just like Christopher Lee, which really helps timestamp that he is edging ever closer and closer to turning at this point. Also, just the dialogue choice to have him call Mace, Mace is his colleague, his peer, for him to call him Master Jedi in that moment just feels so distant in its formality. It's really not something you'd say to, someone you enjoy the company of, a co-worker or a peer or anything like that. So just a great piece of dialogue and a great delivery there that just told the whole story, There's another really good exchange in the episode where Dooku asks Mace, "Do you think the Jedi will keep the peace if they continue to take everything the Senate says as law?" Mace replies, "Luckily we are guided by our counsel and not politics or ego." This is actually a fairly good point by Mace, since we know Dooku is motivated by both of those things. We'll get into that a bit later as well. Dooku can't stand the lack of influence he has to make change as a Jedi. He can't stand seeing all of this shady stuff that senators are doing and them continually getting away with it time and time again. And simply, the Jedi have always had an interesting place in the Galactic Republic. Their status as basically an independent party who still follow the Senate and, act as agents of the Senate in a sense, doesn't sit well with him at all. At the same time, Mace doesn't recognize, and never does at all until he dies in Revenge of the Sith, that the Council can also be misguided and mistaken too. He holds them on a pedestal and is ultimately rewarded by joining their ranks as a result of that. In my opinion, the balance, get it? It's Star Wars, it's all about balance, always. The balance, in my opinion, in this is for us to, have trust and belief in our laws and procedures, while also recognizing their inherent flaws. Neither Dooku or Mace can do this in this moment, in this episode. And Dooku, through the events of these two episodes that we've seen, and tons of other stuff in Jedi Lost as well, but by this point, he's understandably in a place where his faith in the Order he serves is on some very shaky ground. So with all of this in mind, there are two things I really feel drive Count Dooku more than anything else. His need to take meaningful action, and also his sense of justice, his understanding of right and wrong in the world. This is why Dooku does what he does. This is to him what the Jedi should be. Peacekeepers, yes, but more than anything else, guardians of justice. So why did he turn to the dark side? How did all of this lead to that moment? The thing about Dooku's idea of justice is that he doesn't trust anyone else other than himself to carry it out. We have seen he has an underlying distrust of due process and letting the functions of the Republic play out, as we talked about earlier. The problem is that Dooku's anger towards corruption and the failures of traditional criminal justice over time go far beyond just feeling strongly that the Republic is flawed. Dooku feels he must take strong and decisive action to ensure that terrible people get what they deserve, which led him down a path motivated strongly by anger. In the Justice episode, Dooku shows very un-Jedi-like violence towards the Senator that he sees as a cancer to the Republic. They've had a skirmish in the episode, they've had a lightsaber fight. Dooku looks over at the wounded villagers. He looks back at the dodgy Senator who's about to slaughter the whole town. And you get that classic Star Wars imagery of the half and half lit lightsaber. Dooku's lightsaber lighting half of his face, just like Luke in Return of the Jedi. I love that imagery. At this point, teetering on the edge of light and darkness. And in this moment, the darkness wins. Dooku snaps. He force chokes the Senator and force pushes Qui-Gon quite violently away. He very much loses control. The situation gets resolved at the end of the episode after Qui-Gon helps de-escalate that. Dooku admits all he wants is for meaningful action to come to the town and to the planet. Qui-Gon asks him if that is why he took action into his own hands, and Dooku doesn't give an answer in the episode. I'm not sure if he doesn't want to admit it at this point, or if he isn't entirely self-aware enough to know the answer, but in the scheme of the story, the answer is certainly yes. There's a great scene in Master and Apprentice as well, which achieves something very similar. A young Qui-Gon has to deal with this worst of the worst bounty hunter who is about to kill him for fun. Dooku comes in and uses Force Lightning on her to save Qui-Gon's life. But he goes too far, of course. I mean, Force Lightning's a bit of a giveaway. But blasting her with Force Lightning, he tortures the shit out of her, basically. Obviously, using Force Lightning as a Jedi is a huge red flag, even if it is, in my opinion, pretty cool. The whole thing makes Qui-Gon really uncomfortable. He has to jump in the middle, just the same as in Tales of the Jedi, actually. Qui-Gon calms Dooku down here, and he's actually younger in the book than he was in Tales of the Jedi as well. And I got the impression personally from the short that this isn't Qui-Gon's first time having to do this and having to pull his master back from the edge. So going back, the continuity between the two scenes actually worked quite nicely like that, in my opinion. Anyway, while Dooku's still just going all out with the Force Lightning, he's talking a bit of crap, and he says something I think is quite important. He tells her, "You know nothing of true power." These flashes of violence, of course, textbook dark side stuff. And as always with the morality of Star Wars, very applicable to real life as well. These are acts of arguably justifiable anger taken too far. These are very small examples of Dooku trying to assert his power to control a situation, but I think he feels he can make a larger difference in the entire galaxy and make it a better place overall outside of just these random little situations he comes into as a Jedi Knight. But how can he do that? How can he make a larger difference to people's lives? Well, at least very broadly speaking, he does that through the pursuit of power. You take this idea, take it to the largest scale imaginable in Star Wars. Literally, the entire galaxy. This is how Dooku is fueled to become a political idealist and leader of the Separatist Alliance. Of course, even though he too is actually being used by Sidious in that position, we all know it's all part of this complicated plan that Sidious had the whole time. As far as Dooku is concerned, just looking at him and his perspective as a character, he believes he can assert this power, assume this position, and use it to set the world right. Wow, that sounds great, but the whole thing with the dark side is that it's all selfish. What started as potentially noble to some extent, spun out of control, and turn into entitlement. The idea that Dooku, above anyone else, should be the catalyst for the change that he and only he wants to see. In other words, for the galaxy to be remade in his vision. This sense of entitlement is so strong, and this pursuit of power goes so far that it pushes Dooku to act out of fear and hate. And the most important things always to understand in Star Wars about the dark side of the Force, straight from George Lucas and his scripts, they're literally lines in the movies, is the fact that it is all based on the self, the dark side, all self-centered. And as cliche as it is at this point, but as Yoda says in The Phantom Menace, the path to the dark side is fear, leads to anger, leads to hate, leads to suffering. That's the key, and you can definitely see it in Dooku. As I mentioned earlier, this ultimate moment plays out beautifully in Tales of the Jedi as we get to see the exact moment he makes his final choice and becomes a Sith Lord, which the title of the episode perfectly reflects. But seeing these earlier interactions between Dooku and Sidious is great. We hadn't gotten anything at all in canon before Attack of the Clones, so it was cool to see something this early. Sidious tells Dooku, "Remember what you told me. The Jedi blindly serve a corrupt Senate that fails the Republic it represents." Palpatine also says in this scene that their goal is to remake the galaxy, which Dooku can definitely resonate with, but he probably has a different idea of that than Sheev does, to be honest. I don't think Dooku would have any part knowingly in Palpatine's plan to basically take the galaxy and make it be a galactic empire. At least there might be some material I'm missing about that. I'm not 100% sure, but based on everything I've read and seen of Dooku so far and everything they've come out with, that's my personal interpretation. I don't think Dooku would knowingly take part in the creation of the Empire. I think he's being manipulated by he's clearly being manipulated by Palpatine, but I think Darth Sidious is leading him on to believe that we'll remake the galaxy, we'll win the war, we'll do all this stuff, but under the vision that Dooku has for the Separatist Alliance, and not necessarily through, the fascism that the Empire becomes. But then, of course, Yaddle tracks Dooku to his lair in the works on Coruscant. They have a sick lightsaber fight, but it's what they say to each other that really reveals a lot here. Yaddle makes clear there is still a chance to make things right. Dooku replies, I'm afraid it is too late. By the way, you got to check the episode out. I'm not trying to do the moment justice or tell the story or anything like that. I'm just breaking down the episode, dude. You need to check out the episode. The performances here are so good. Anyway, in this moment, Dooku is fearful to do the right thing and face the ramifications for what he's done. At this point, he's already assassinated Sifo Dyas. He's already ordered the clone army. He's already been doing all this really shady background, political espionage, playing Sidious's games for him, basically being his puppet. When Yaddle confronts him about it, there's clearly some regret there. And there's a moment of reflection there that I love that you see in the episode. And he can still turn on Sidious, he can still team up with Yaddle, he can still expose the plot and face those ramifications. But instead of being accountable and redeeming himself, Dooku is too afraid to face his mistakes. And you can see the honesty again in the performance. The animation is fantastic. Dooku makes his mission statement very clear, and I was already thinking about a lot of the ideas about his character and for this video before I rewatched The Sith Lord, and he says it loud and clear, his entire mission statement, his entire goal in the episode. He says, I only want to bring peace and order to the galaxy. Yaddle points out, so many have already died for what he calls order. And she is 100% correct. Think of all the violent shit he's done, It started small with him as a Jedi Master and, fairly justifiable in some cases, but it only continued to grow. His search for power became all consuming, and it has gotten him to this ultimate point where he has been doing these terrible things. He's already scheming with the Lord of the Sith. He's been exposed for it. But there is always a final chance to do the right thing in the end. Dooku is faced with the choice that is recurring in Star Wars, which I love, the ultimate light or dark choice. Strike your opponent down in anger or throw away your weapon. Here in this just scene that gives me chills, I love the end of this episode so much, man. It just leaves me haunted. The bloody Kevin Kiner's score is phenomenal that accompanies all of this as well. But Dooku makes his choice. He seals his fate. He strikes Yaddle down in anger, executes her, for what he calls the greater good, for what he calls order. I love it because it's recognisable to other moments in the saga, of course. When you think about Luke in Return of the Jedi, now we have Ahsoka and Anakin in episode 5 of Ahsoka. But the moment itself is also deceptively relatable to us all. You can make the easier decision in this moment out of fear or anger, and there are tons of moments in our lives where we face a similar test. Hopefully for no one watching this, it's like literally killing someone. But there is truth in the moment. We all understand it. And that's what makes great Star Wars storytelling, in my opinion, and always has. In this moment, in this choice, despite the clear conflict in him that we see, all of Dooku's motivations and choices up until this point come together and he chooses to act selfishly. And of course, the thing is, Dooku always had a point. The Republic did suck in a lot of ways, and that fact just makes the character's journey even more compelling. But to go into some real-world philosophy and stuff that Star Wars is always about, actions taken out of fear and hate are never the answer. And the thing is, it's not always super clear in the films and in the Clone Wars because we do very much only see one side of Dooku in those mediums. But this decision for Dooku to finally cement himself as a Sith Lord, to join the Sith and be, a practitioner of the dark side, it wasn't a pleasant one for Dooku. We see him being a classy villain a lot, but I'm pretty sure that Jedi Lost is actually the only story so far where we've seen Dooku behind the scenes, in his own home, just totally broken and struggling to go on, struggling to live as a Sith, which I thought was a really important inclusion in that story. You see that, and then you add the context of the films with that perspective, and you realise he goes on for the next decade plus of his life to be unknowingly manipulated and used as a pawn in Palpatine's game. All of his goals and hopes to make change in a galaxy that is doomed from the start, it really is tragic. Star Wars is all about moral choices made by characters and imparting lessons of life onto the audience. And where the saga often focuses on, themes of hope, perseverance, and most importantly, redemption, there is no redemption and only suffering for Count Dooku.